ho ho, motherfucker. Or Merry Christmas, or whatever people say this time of year. I appreciate y'all taking some time out of this busy holiday season to come kick it with me for a few minutes and check out my favorite albums of 2022. But before we get into the list, I just want to go over my criteria for making this list. First is replay value. Did I have this album on repeat or not? Next is impact or overall response. I just want to know how everybody else gauged these albums. Was the album focused and digestible? Me, the perfect spot is 8 to 14 songs. That's the sweet spot for me. But overall, did this album have a focus and did it have an overall narrative to it? Next, did I have time to sit with this album? If an album got released in November, I probably don't have it on this list because I didn't have enough time to sit and process this album. And last, and probably least, is sales. Numbers don't mean everything, but they say numbers don't lie. Now that that's out of the way, let's waste no more time. Let's get into some honorable mentions. Starting off with the DJ Drama assisted Results Take Time by Simba. Simba, one of my favorite new spitters, one of the bright spots in 2022 hip hop, and he definitely proved it with this one. Some of my favorite tracks: Can't Win for Nothing, Pop Out with 2 Chainz, Sacrifices with Friday. Simba definitely here to stay. Next is Grip with 5 and a Fuck You. Last year he dropped off an album which was in my top 5 with I Died for This, and he cooked up this album with a bunch of different producers in 7 days, and it's just kind of a Lucy to hold us over until his next album, but this Lucy is better than a lot of people's full album. Next up is Triple S by Freddie Gibbs. I know a lot of people are going to have this in their top 10, maybe even top 5, but personally, I just haven't had enough time to sit and digest this album. His last couple albums that he released that I was very high on, he released in the first quarter of whatever year he dropped in, so I had a lot more time by the end of the year to digest this one. From what I've heard, I definitely fuck with what I heard, but just not enough time yet. And the same could be said about my last honorable mention, Love for Rent by Smino. Again, this one's probably in a lot of people's top 10s or top 5s, but he just released it last month, and there's some bops on there. There's definitely some bangers on there, but just not enough time to sit with this one. My number 10 hip-hop album of 2022, Vince Staples, Ramona Park, Broke My Heart. This man, Vince Staples, has gotten better every time he drops. Going back to when I first heard him with his Hell Can Wait EP, every time he's dropped after that, he's just improved. He's just evolved, and this year's Ramona Park Broke My Heart is no exception. He's coming off the back of 2021's self-titled album Vince Staples, and this album is kind of just a continuation of that. Great raps, amazing melodies, very selective, but the features have knocked it out the park every time, and it features one of my favorite songs this entire year with When Sparks Fly. My number 9 hip-hop album of 2022, KD3, Nas and Hit Boy. Nas shouldn't be doing this, bro. Point blank, simply put, Nas shouldn't be doing this at this stage of his career, but yet he's on the best run of his 30-year career. And if that doesn't say all that needs to be said, then I don't know what to tell you. Him and Hit Boy have just unmatched chemistry. Hit Boy has collabed with a lot of people over the years, but I really think that what him and Nas have is really something special, and KD3 is just another example of that. You start with KD 1, 2, he dropped Magic at the end of last year, and now he drops off KD 3, 4 albums in 2.5, 3 years is ridiculous at his age and at this stage in his career. The song Beef is Nas in his bag, personifying beef and talking through the perspective of beef. But this whole album is filled with something for everybody, and Nas just continues to impress and continues to add to his already Hall of Fame resume. My number 8 hip-hop song of 2022, Ghetto Gods, Earth Gang. Now this album did get pushed back a few times, so I know a few fans, myself included, were getting a little bit impatient and asking that question, Is this album going to be worth the wait? Well, my answer to that question is absolutely. There were a few songs on here that I really didn't care for, and it was 17 songs, so I could have done without a few songs on this album, but the rest of it, man, there was some moments on this album. The first half, you got the expected, but still dope as hell JID collaboration track with Waterboys. Then you got the Music Soul Child assisted throwback 90s track, Amen. And then one of my favorite songs this entire year, All Eyes on Me, is sure to make you shed a few tears. And then in the second half, we get the Baby Tate assisted Black Pearls, as well as the first single off this album, American Horror Story, which is just beautiful. I would do it no justice describing the track. Just go out of your way to check that out when you're done with this video. And then we get probably the biggest moment on this entire album, one of the biggest moments this entire year. We get Nick Cannon and CeeLo Green on the same track together. Say what you will about Nick Cannon, but the things he's managed to do in the culture, the impact he's managed to make, maybe not music-wise, but the impact he's managed to make in other means is huge. And then they got CeeLo Green on here rapping. This album sounds like it was worth the wait to me. My number 7 hip-hop album of 2022, God Don't Make Mistakes, Conway the Machine. This is another album that got pushed back and fans were getting a little bit impatient for, but again, this one was definitely worth the wait. If you're looking for sophisticated gangster rap, that raw and gritty East Coast shit, then look no further than this album right here. With every song that plays on this album, I was just reminded of why it took so long to get this album, why it took so long to get Conway's debut Shady album. It's because of the attention to detail. It's the little things. It's making sure that all the features are right, making sure that the mixing was right, making sure that the beats were banging. And he checked all the boxes, in my opinion. One of the biggest highlights on this entire album were the features. Everybody knocked it out the park, from Wayne, Ross, Keisha Plume on the vocals. You got Beanie Siegel, bro, sounded raw and raspy as ever after his accident, but sounded as lyrical as ever, as raw and gritty as ever. Of course, he's got the posse cut with Benny and West Side Gun with John Woo Flick. And then he also has his young guns, his signees to his drum work label, Seven the Genius and Jay Skis, who absolutely annihilate their verses. This album was 12 perfect songs, and I couldn't ask for more with this one. My number 6 hip-hop album of 2022, More Black Superheroes, West Side Boogie. Now, where do I start with this album? I'll start by saying this album had very high expectations to me because, in my opinion, his debut album, Everything for Sale, was an instant classic. So this one had a very high bar to hit. And I hate to compare the two, but this album, in my opinion anyway, didn't live up to that high bar that Everything for Sale set. But it is a great album, very special album in its own right. The first couple singles were the perfect singles in my opinion. Aight, Killer Mode, and Stuck. My favorite track on this is probably Prideful Part 2. Even the tracks that on first listen that I wasn't all the way feeling have since grown on me. And in my opinion, this is an album with 0 skips. My number 5 hip-hop album of 2022, Melt My Eyes, See the Future, Denzel Curry. Now, if Denzel did melt his eyes and he did see the future, he would have saw that this album wound up in my top 5. And after I heard the lead single, Walkin', at the beginning of this year, it's no wonder that this album wound up in my top 5. And it honestly could have been higher. In your list, it might be a little bit higher. On some other people's list, it might be a little bit higher. And I'm not mad at that at all. The melodies on this album, bro. The melodies are out of this world. I already mentioned Walkin', but like, have you listened to X-Wing, bro? Have you listened to X-Wing? After this video, go listen to X-Wing and try not to have that shit stuck in your head the rest of the day or the next day, bro. Impossible. This album features a lot of narratives on mental health, just like another album that you'll see later in this list. And I definitely got to shout out, definitely got to applaud Denzel for talking about those topics. But he got some ignorant shit too, bro. He definitely got some ignorant shit on here too. Look no further than Ain't No Way, featuring Rico Nasty, who has an amazing verse. JID, surprisingly, JID doesn't have the best verse on this track. I'm going to have to give this to Rico. So there's a great balance of storytelling, mental health topics, but also giving you that ignorant shit as well. If you look up the definition of underrated in the dictionary, there's a big old picture of Denzel sitting right there. My number 4 hip-hop album of 2022, It's Almost Dry, Pusha T. And no, he wasn't talking about your bitch. He was talking about laundry. Pusha T was talking about laundry on this album, and Pusha T talks about laundry better than anybody in the game, bro. You can definitely make the argument that's all he talks about, which isn't true, but I'll put it to you like this. When teams face the Kansas City Chiefs, they know that they're going to pass that ball, but they still can't stop it. So if you're Pusha T, if you know people can't fuck with your coke raps, your laundry raps, then why would you switch it up, bro? You're winning with this shit. You're doing it better than anybody is doing it right now, and probably better than anybody's done it in history. This album right here is dark, it's sinister, it's borderline psychotic sometimes. Pharrell and Kanye collabed on the production, and it was almost like a versus battle between Pharrell and Ye, but on a Pusha T album, which just added another level to it. From start to finish, this 12-song album checks all the boxes. You want something with a banging ass beat? Look no further than Let the Smokers Shine the Coupes. You want something that's sample heavy? Look no further than Dreaming of the Past. You want a killer feature? Neck and Wrist has a standout Jay-Z feature. He don't drop a lot nowadays, but when he drops a guest verse, you know that shit's going to be something to talk about. Just So You Remember is dark and aggressive. Scrape It Off the Top with Don Toliver is Pusha in his melodic bag, but still giving you that street shit. And the outro of this album, I Pray For You, with his brother No Malice, has No Malice return to his grinding days and gives a standout verse of the year contender. This album is quality through and through, and Pusha T is him. And he be killing it with the Arby's commercials too. My number 3 album of 2022, Drill Music in Zion, Lupe Fiasco. I honestly had this song as my number 1 album until just a few weeks ago when I considered everything that's in my criteria. I just don't think this album had a big enough impact as the other albums higher in this list, but in my personal opinion, this album's a masterpiece. This album has everything that we've come to know and love about Lupe Fiasco over his almost 2-decade-long career. A dense lyricism. There's not an empty bar on this entire album. His melody game is on point for sure on this one. He's got bars that make you rewind and go, yo, what did he just say here? And all of that is very apparent throughout this entire album. But what I really want to shine a light on is the 3-song run from Precious Things through to Miss Mural might be the best 3-song run on any album this year, but it might be the best 3-song run on any album that I've ever personally heard. Precious Things is Lupe talking through the perspective of hands. It might sound whack when I say it, but definitely go out of your way to check that out. And if you're not impressed, bro, I'll pay your car note. Track number 5, Kiosk, is him talking through the perspective of a kiosk owner in the mall, and it's kind of just a narrative on consumerism broken down as only Lupe can. And a little spoiler about track number 6, you're gonna see that near the top of my 2022 songs of the year. It is that good. It's Lupe in his storytelling bag, telling a story about a painter talking to a patron And I'll just leave it at that. If you haven't heard Miss Mural, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice. But it doesn't stop there. The last track on this 10-song album, On Phonem, again, one of my favorite tracks this entire year. It's whimsical, but also sobering in the lyrics. The first verse is one of my favorite verses this entire year. This album is short, but it's concise and focused, and it's an amazing masterpiece in my opinion. My number 2 hip-hop album of 2022, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, Kendrick Lamar. From Miss Mural to Mr. Morale, we waited 5 years for this album by Kendrick, and it's no wonder. You cannot make an album of this quality in just a couple months or a year or even 2 years. This album was so personal to the point where it was almost intrusive at times on certain songs on here, and that type of shit doesn't happen overnight. I know a lot of people who initially were listening to this album with what I call damn ears. They were still viewing it through the same lens as they viewed Damn. They were still listening to it with the same ears they listened to Damn with. They weren't open to new ideas. They weren't open to a new type of sound initially. But I've definitely found that those same people at this time in the year have came around. And if you haven't came around on this album and you still hating on this album, you probably eat hot Cheetos and own some Cookie Monster pajamas. Does this album have a lot of songs? Yes. Is this album digestible? Not really. Those 2 reasons are a big reason why it's the number 2 album of the year and not my number 1. But 18 songs is a lot of songs, but head to head, you'd be hard pressed to find better songs than what appear on this album. This album, very similar to Melt My Eyes, tackles subjects of depression, mental health, addiction, family trauma, breaking that cycle, breaking the generational curse, and it has some real powerful moments. Of course, everybody knows about We Cry Together. That song was such a different take on just a regular toxic relationship. It was like some live theater playing out over some instrumentals laced by Alchemist. Probably the most powerful moment on this entire album is the second to last song, Mother I Sober, where it's Kendrick talking about family trauma and breaking that generational curse. I'm doing it no justice describing it, but damn, if you don't shed some tears to that song, bro, you ain't human. Kendrick also admits on this album about a sex addiction and admitting that he might be racist because he was fucking the white girls to get back at slave owners, which sounds wild to say out loud, but Kendrick makes it work. Kendrick also tackles a previously untouched subject in hip-hop, at least to my knowledge, with Auntie Diaries, talking about his aunt and subsequently his cousin and their troubles and their problems that they go through in transitioning. The now famous line, my auntie is a man now, or Demetrius is Marianne now. I don't think I've ever heard this subject tackled before, and Kendrick did it beautifully. Of course, there's some, I don't even want to say ignorant, because nothing Kendrick does nowadays is ignorant, but there's definitely some of that turn up shit with N95. Rich Spirit, I wouldn't say is turned up, but Rich Spirit got a cool type of swagger to it. Same could be said about Savior and Mr. Morale. The title track is just primal, animalistic, and just aggressive. I love it. This album has everything I could have wanted from a Kendrick Lamar album in 2022, and I hope we don't, but I would wait 5 years to get another album of this quality. And my number 1 hip-hop album of 2022, J.I.D., The Forever Story. At times, I've compared J.I.D. to Steph Curry, and if that comparison is true, then The Forever Story was his 2015-16 season. Now, we all knew, or at least I knew, that J.I.D. could rap. We've heard the Never Story, and we heard DiCaprio too. But could J.I.D. put together a full-length, top to bottom, no skip, classic? Yes. Yes, he can. And that's exactly what he did with this one. From the lead single, surround sound, I knew that we were in for something real special. If surround sound was the first taste of this album you were giving us, the sky's the limit, bro. He soared to the sky and up past the sky with this one. The second single, Dance Now, might have been even better than the first. And then when the album actually got released, he came out swinging with Radar. Crack Sandwich is one of my favorite songs this entire year. The storytelling, especially in the second verse, is so dope. JID also shows off some much improved vocals on Cody Blue 31, which is dedicated to the child of a friend who tragically passed away, and the song definitely does him justice. The song is just a beautiful piece of work. The theme of family is very evident throughout this whole entire album, but no more evident than on the tracks Brother Nem featuring Lil Durk and Sister Nem. Also, the track Better Days has a lot of family aspects to it, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Decent amount of features on this album, and every single one of them held their own or knocked it out the park. You got Yasin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, on the track Stars. You got Lil Wayne on Just in Time, which if you get a Wayne feature, that's one of the best stamps of approval that you can get. And the last track, Lauder 2, is just dizzying. It's blistering. It's JID at the most elite of elite levels of just rapping ability. He's basically just showing off at this point. The way he's rapping on beat, the pockets he's finding with the drums and the bass that was put down by Thundercat is just out of this world. I made the comparison to Steph Curry. This track is the equivalent of Steph Curry chucking up a half-court shot, or before the games when he's chucking up shots from the tunnel and shit. That's this track right here. JID not only proved that he can rap with the best of them, rap better than the best of them, but he can also make a great fucking album. And that was my top 10 hip-hop albums of 2022. Let me know what I got wrong down in the comments. Let me know what I got right down in the comments. If you fucked with the video that you watched today, hit that subscribe button and check out another list right here. And remember, if it's not too dope, then it's probably mids. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.